story has two parts. We're dealing with the cost of housing exploding. That's the first part of it. Then we're going to micro into Atlanta because the housing shortage or housing issue in Atlanta is we got crowds standing in front of to get it housing. Like it's crazy. Like to actually, if you have a voucher for Section 8, like limited amount of housing. Okay.
So we already know that home prices are keeping first-time buyers on the sidelines, but how about the cost of ownership that they don't tell you about? Think maintenance, property taxes, insurance payments. All of those are piling up, and now the average homeowner is paying nearly $16,000 per year for these hidden costs. Jackie, I come to you, and you've heard me talk about this before. When I was a homeowner, the value of my home kept going down, but my insurance was going up, my property taxes were going up, my maintenance was going up, and I kept looking at myself like, how is this happening? How is this possible?
And I think that's a reality for a lot of people. It has just become a lot more expensive. And so, you know, what used to be a problem of biting off more home than you can chew with respect to your mortgage, for example, you've got to take into account all of these costs as well, especially if we're headed into some potentially rocky times, right? You don't want to see people lose homes or make a bad decision as a result of that. And that sort of brings me back to this notion that Dagan brought up the other day, which is, again, kind of touting this idea that everybody should be a homeowner, that it's part of the American dream and it's sort of a God-given right.
And that's a fact. Everybody shouldn't be a homeowner. Everybody doesn't need to own a home. And it's not a negative thing, just everybody doesn't need to own a home. And if you're somebody you think and you put your value, you measure your value based on if you have a house or don't have a house, then I think what you're doing right there is setting yourself up for a bad situation. Because having a property, the maintenance that's involved in it, that alone can bankrupt some people. That can really cause them to actually sell it. Then when you add in the cost of insurance, we already see insurance companies leaving Georgia. We've seen them leaving California. And that's the wildest part. These insurance companies have been here for the longest period of time. They've been here for the longest. But the cost of doing business, inflation, and I think part of it is corporate greed.
Congratulations, well done.
Is actually driving up a lot of that. When you have margins that you have to meet, that you have to make, and you're missing those margins, the very first thing they think about is raising the prices. And if you're talking about places like California, which had the Palisades, it just becomes just a worse situation. So part of this segment is you just got to realize that it's nothing wrong with waiting to buy a house to have certain things in order. I'm just saying.
We've got to figure out how to make sure that everyone can be a homeowner. The last time that happened, it led us to the subprime mortgage crisis. And there were a couple of presidents who were in on that game that led us to where we had the bubble burst in that way. And so, you know, I wonder, you always bring up the idea of maybe you shouldn't be an owner and you should take that money and invest it in the stock market. Maybe we have to get our heads around the fact that some people will be destined to be owners because that's their financial situation, and some people just won't. And there's got to be a certain amount of acceptance around that, too.
Brian, Marcus Lemonis, though, would look at me and say we should encourage as many people, if not all, to be homeowners because that's the best way to build long-term generational.
Cap, being a homeowner is not the best way to build long-term generational wealth. It's actually owning a business.
Wealth.
Well, I think it makes you a more independent person when you have your own property. Then you start thinking about, what do I do to improve my property? You get.
He's right about that, but it doesn't make you a more independent person. It just requires you to be a more independent person, and you decide if you're going to do it or not. But your wealth is not going to be tied to their house no more. We're in a different time, a different season. You don't need to have a home or to own a home to build wealth. Even though you can build wealth owning a home, you will build more wealth and have better nights and have better issues, less issues, just by owning a business and putting your skill set together to either build a business, get a business, something like that, because that's the new American dream, especially one that's flexible, that you can go anywhere in this country and you can work Now you're changing it, and that's the true American dream: mobility and income, cash flow.
Mad when people increase your taxes. If you don't have property, you don't get hit by property taxes. You never get mad about that. So I do think independent ownership does matter. But it's not the dream for everybody. Like it definitely is not. I'm generationally bound. As a Gen X guy, home ownership was just part of my view of what it meant to be an American. But I know Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whatever, they don't necessarily think that way. So maybe we shouldn't be asking them to conform to that view, but I do get nervous about it because when you don't own stuff, then you look to other people to give you stuff more often than if you own things. And so that's like a culture.
I don't think that's right. If you don't own stuff, you don't necessarily look for other people to give you something. If you don't own stuff, you don't have to, you don't get the opportunity to develop. The best word to say, I say, is faithfulness or responsibility. Because there is something about actually owning a home that you automatically become responsible of, or you're stretched to be responsible. I mean, I remember the very first time my water heater broke and I came home from vacation and I'm sitting back looking at this water heater like, dang, I just was in the business so I could call somebody. Hey, dude, can you come by here? You guys work on this. Come by and take a look at this. But it stretched me because it was a surprise to come home and see a freaking water all in your basement. That's a big thing right there. So it does develop a level of responsibility, but you can get that responsibility from not owning stuff. And like I said, again, you can get it from, you can own a business. You can own a business and have that, and learn and develop that same level of responsibility. So it's not always tied to owning a home because not everybody needs to own a house.